Hello and welcome into another edition of the Daily Fix. I am Stephen Serda. This is Foolish Club Media. It is Tuesday, March 11th, second day of free agency across the NFL, and it started very early this morning. So I hope everyone has been keeping track of all of the moves. Kansas City Chiefs with another big contract on Tuesday that I don't think was necessarily expected by many fans. We finally saw some of the other Chiefs free agents land in new homes. So we're still waiting on Justin Reed and Charles Omenihu to see what happens with those players. But been a very busy free agency period for the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think overall you got to be pretty happy with what the Chiefs have done so far during this period. They've given out multiple big contracts. They've decided to retain their own talent. And they've added depth at positions of need and positions where we saw them kind of flounder a little bit last year. So overall, happy with what the Chiefs have done so far. So we're going to get into that today and going to talk about Tershawn Wharton and him heading to the Carolina Panthers because just one of my favorite players. Bummed to see him go, but so happy for an undrafted player to get that type of contract and to get an opportunity to really prove what he can be outside of a defensive line that's led by Chris Jones. And then this quarterback battle that is shaping up in Indianapolis is the quarterback battle that I don't think any of us wanted, but now it's going to be something that's really interesting to watch as we head into 2025. So just if this is your first time joining us here on the Daily Fix, a couple quick topics. We're not going to keep you too long. As always, please make sure you subscribe, rate, and review everything that we're doing right here on Foolish Club Media. Have everything you need to know about Chiefs free agency on the channel, so make sure you stay locked in. Have the latest episode of each season tomorrow. Rocky and Kramer update everything about free agency and what's happening here and how they feel about the Chiefs moves. Also, Brian's World is returning tomorrow afternoon. So you want to be on the lookout for that. Brian's got plenty of thoughts on Chiefs free agency as well. So stay locked in right here. But as I already mentioned, the Chiefs, I think in a little bit of a surprising move earlier this afternoon or morning, I guess. I think it was afternoon. I don't know. It's all been kind of a day. So I'll try to keep up with all of these free agent moves across the NFL. But the Chiefs signed former Chargers cornerback and Titans cornerback Kristian Fulton to a 2-year deal. It's an interesting move. The deal is worth $20 million, $15 million guaranteed at signing. Fulton coming off of a nice year with the Chargers after signing in free agency on a 1-year contract. And Fulton's got the exact type of size that the Chiefs generally covet in their outside corners. Now, they didn't necessarily have that last year when they had to move Trent McDuffie to the outside out of necessity because they just simply didn't have the depth that they had the season before when they were trotting out L'Jarius Sneed, Trent McDuffie, Jalen Watson, Joshua Williams. And I still don't really know what the hell was going on with Joshua Williams last season. But when Jalen Watson was healthy, it was Jalen Watson, Najee Johnson, and Joshua Williams was basically relegated to special teams. He did not play defensive snaps in the postseason for the Kansas City Chiefs, despite the fact that down the stretch, we saw Joshua Williams give the Chiefs some competent play at outside corner. But they refused to do that. And so I don't have a problem with the Kristian Fulton deal. I think it's a cost-effective cornerback deal for a very solid player. And I think this is really the Chiefs secondary struggles down the stretch last season after Jalen Watson goes down. I think this is the Chiefs saying, we're not going through that again. We're not going to put Trent McDuffie in that situation again. And we don't want the secondary to be in that situation again because the Chiefs defense is built on so many levels, and they shore up the linebacker core by bringing Nick Bolton back. You still have Drew Tranquill in that group. And now the safety room is intriguing moving forward because this is kind of something that I had talked about earlier in the offseason with it did not seem like Justin Reed is going to be back, and Justin Reed's still floating around out there, though there's several teams that are rumored to have interest in Justin Reed, but he is not signed anywhere as of yet. And it seemed less and less likely that the Chiefs were going to bring back Justin Reed on a veteran contract. And so I think this move It shores up your secondary in a way that I wasn't totally prepared for the Chiefs to do. I did not expect them to sign a corner in free agency. They've done such a good job drafting and developing that position. This was a bit of a surprise for me, but I think it's a welcome move for the Kansas City Chiefs. They add depth there, and now Trent McDuffie can play his more traditional slot corner role where he is the most effective. We see Steve Spagnuolo move him all around the formation, blitz him, and how incredible of a playmaker he is playing that way. He is an all-pro caliber corner. I still think he's an all-pro caliber corner playing outside, but this is where Trent McDuffie is his most effective. This is where Trent McDuffie can be one of the best defensive players in the NFL. Having Jalen Watson and Kristian Fulton on the outside now, maybe Joshua Williams finds a way to get back into the mix. We'll see. But then I think also the safety room, like this is a definitive, they are not bringing back Justin Reed. It's going to be Brian Cook, Jaden Hicks, and probably Chamari Connor is going to be in the mix there, because for the positives that Chamari Connor had last season, he had no business being in coverage most of the time. Chamari Connor was a liability in coverage, but he's still an effective player. Like, I'm not willing to totally write off Chamari Connor, but he's a more traditional safety. Like, he's a guy that is like a rocket around the line of scrimmage. And so you want him up there making tackles and doing that stuff, or maybe he can make some more plays in the back end. We saw him get some interceptions and stuff this season, but he is not a guy that is going to run step for step, route for route with an NFL caliber wide receiver. So I'm excited about the Kristian Fulton move. I think he fits the Chiefs' typical outside cornerback profile, and I think he'll step right in day one and have an impact on this defense. And I think the secondary is really kind of, this is the secondary we could probably expect for 2025, barring them, adding a little bit more there in the draft class, which they tend to do. So, but I think it's a strong move for the Kansas City Chiefs. It's an effective move, and one that I honestly did not see coming. So Kristian Fulton, welcome to Kansas City. Now, this move that I think we all saw coming, and it had already been reported that Tershawn Wharton's market was going to be a lot stronger than I think anybody initially anticipated, and deservedly so. These defensive line contracts, especially guys that can rush from the interior, and Tershawn Wharton is that. Like, he is a monster human being, and undrafted player out of Missouri S&T, like Division II school. He joined the Kansas City Chiefs in 2020 and carved out a role for himself in training camp as an undrafted player. And then he had ACL tear 2 years ago, and then works his way back from that. And last season had 6.5 sacks in the regular season to go along with 2 postseason sacks, and had a great year for the Chiefs last season. He was very significant for the Chiefs in 2024 along that defensive line. And I don't think the defensive line in the pass rush, like, yes, Chris Jones was incredible last season, and Chris Jones gets all of the accolades and making everybody eat because he is such a dominant future Hall of Fame player. But they needed Tershawn Wharton last year. They needed him to play this way in a contract year. And so he absolutely deserves the 3-year contract that he gets from the Carolina Panthers. It's a really big deal. I think it was $54 million. Like, for an undrafted player like him to go out and get the opportunity to get this kind of money and this kind of payday, it's just a good story. And you love seeing these kinds of guys get developed, whether they wind up being long-term from the teams that signed them early on in their careers or not. So Tershawn Wharton, wish you nothing but the best. Loved having you here in Kansas City. Maybe we'll see you back one day here in the near future. The Panthers were in on Milton Williams too, and they wind up losing out on him at the llast minute. So they get Tershawn Wharton. It's a nice consolation prize. Like, it's a cheaper player than Milton Williams. And I think Tershawn Wharton is a player that still hasn't hit his ceiling in the NFL. Like, he's a guy that could still come in and have a pretty big impact, and he's still young enough that he could still be an ascending player for the Carolina Panthers. So just a great story. And if you're unfamiliar with Tershawn Wharton, he's been a tremendous player for the Kansas City Chiefs for the last few years. So very happy to see him. Bummed that he didn't get to sign with the Chiefs, but I am a little bit worried about the Chiefs defensive line moving forward here. And I don't really know what the plan is there, because the Chiefs like to have so much depth along the defensive line. And we know Chris Jones is going to be here. We know George Karlaftis is going to be here. We know Mike Dana is going to be here, but along the defensive line without Charles Omenihu and now Tershawn Wharton, you start to get a little weary of that pass rush depth. They still have Felix Anudike-Uzomah, who finally showed some strides last year, but I do think that we kind of know what Felix is at this point. Maybe there's more to his game here in the NFL. Maybe he can really take another step in 2025, but it feels like Felix is just a situational guy. Like he's on an every down type of player. And, defensive line contracts are so high right now in the NFL. I don't think there's much else outside of value moves. Maybe the market for Charles Omenihu is not as high as we thought, and that's why he's still floating around out there and hasn't signed with anybody. So maybe there's a cost-effective move to make there if Charles Omenihu wants to come back to Kansas City, but it's certainly not going to be a huge contract for him. And I think Charles Omenihu, who was wildly impactful when he returned from his ACL tear last year, I think he deserves to get paid. So we'll see what happens with him. But as of right now, I think that's the one spot on this defense where I'm a little bit worried about the 2025 outlook for the Kansas City Chiefs is that defensive line and pass rush. And with them addressing tackle now in free agency, whether it's the tackle that you want, I'd still love to see them continue to stack resources along the offensive line until they get it right. Hey, maybe pass rusher is where the Chiefs are willing to go early in the draft now. And I don't think you can ever go wrong building through the trenches, as I already mentioned earlier this week. So like to see what they're doing there, but I am a little bit worried about the Chiefs pass rush moving forward here until we start to see some things shape up. But I do want to see them attack that position in the draft. So maybe that's the plan here moving forward. Final thing before we get out of here, the Indianapolis Colts signed backup quarterback, former Giants quarterback, former Vikings quarterback, Daniel Jones to a one-year contract. I think it was a one-year, $14 million deal to compete with Anthony Richardson. And they were straight up honest about it. They were like, we want to have a quarterback competition. Shane Steichen and the Colts were not happy with Anthony Richardson's progress last season. And Richardson had some injury problems, had some problems staying on the field, but then there's been lots of questions about his work ethic and focus and whatever coming into the NFL. But he's an extremely young player, extremely rare athletic trait player who has not played a ton of football. Didn't start until late into his college career, but his physical tool sets are off the charts. Now it's like the mental side of the game, and can they get a fire lit under him with Daniel Jones trying to challenge Anthony Richardson for his starting job next year in Indy? Like, I don't think the Colts are necessarily close to doing anything. Like, they've been kind of the last couple of seasons like a fringe playoff team, and that's about it. Like, not a team that you're actually worried about or a team that's actually competing for anything in the league. But they do need an answer here. Like, I love Anthony Richardson. I see... Like, I dream of the ceiling when I see him launching rockets down the field and just flicking the football 60 yards because his arm is so insane and his ability to run and his size. Like, all of the check marks are there athletically for Anthony Richardson to be an absolutely insane NFL quarterback. But for whatever reason, it just hasn't manifested yet. It just hasn't totally worked out for the Colts. And so maybe this is actually a good thing. I was not on board with what they did last season when they benched him for Joe Flacco and decided to move off of him because I think those young quarterbacks need those reps. Like, there's been all kinds of weird reports about the Vikings and maybe they were going to try to trade for Anthony Richardson because they're not totally sold on JJ McCarthy, which I think is insane because we haven't even seen JJ McCarthy yet. Like, he was hurt all his entire rookie season. I understand the urgency in the modern day NFL to get these things figured out and not want to wait on these quarterbacks. And these head coaches and general managers and front offices need instant returns on their investment to feel secure in their job because that's the way the NFL works these days. But I just don't feel like Anthony Richardson has necessarily been in the best situation, especially last season. But maybe Daniel Jones does light a fire under him because I can tell you what, I just want to see Anthony Richardson work out. I think the physical tools are there for him to be an incredible player. And if he can figure out how to actually be a professional athlete and how to grind and how to do everything that these guys have to do to be elite NFL quarterbacks, I still believe Anthony Richardson can be a special player if he can figure it out. He's got to work on his accuracy. He's got to work on his IQ. He's got to work on his field awareness and all of that stuff. He's got to work on staying healthy. He's got to figure all of that stuff out this offseason. And maybe Daniel Jones is really the guy who finally pushes him to do that. The Colts don't actually wind up spending a ton of money. It's a very incentive, a base deal for Daniel Jones on a 1-year contract. So I just want to see Anthony Richardson work out. But also, this could be just a funny situation to watch next season. I don't expect Daniel Jones to really offer you that much, but maybe Daniel Jones has more life in him after leaving the New York Giants like Sam Darnold did after getting out of all of the poor situations that he's been in so far in his career. So we'll see. Again, stay locked in right here on Foolish Club Media for all the free agency updates. Keep you up to date right here, so make sure you subscribe, rate, and review. Be on the lookout for the latest episode of Beach Season tomorrow morning, as well as the latest episode of Brian's World coming out tomorrow afternoon. I'll also be back with more updates, anything you need to know about the Chiefs' moves moving forward here. We'll talk to you guys then.